Okay, gotta confess. You know those collectible vinyl figurines, the ones everyone's kind of obsessed with these days?
Right, right.
Well, let's just say I may or may not have maybe blown an entire paycheck on a limited edition Space Ranger
Uh-huh.
once.
Oh, yeah.
So I get it, getting passionate about something. It's totally normal. But how do you know when that interest maybe crosses a line?
Uh,
Which is exactly what we're going to be unpacking today. We're
yeah.
doing a deep dive into this whole world of fandom.
Hmm.
And specifically because, well, someone you care about is really into a certain pop star, right?
Right.
And you're stuck trying to figure out if it's just a phase or if it's, something more.
Yeah.
Like, should you step in? Should you just completely butt out?
Oh, yeah.
The stuff you said, it's got some seriously interesting points on both sides.
It really does, yeah.
Hmm.
So, we see fandom painted as like this pure, innocent, fun thing.
Yeah.
Or it's like the complete opposite, right? Like a train wreck of obsession.
Yeah.
The reality is, like most things, I think it's more nuanced than that.
Absolutely. And one of the articles even used this example of a mom whose like devotion to this pop star is causing some serious issues at home.
Oh, wow.
Think constant merch purchases, trips to see every concert, even neglecting some, basic needs to afford it all.
Wow.
Yeah, it definitely made me think twice.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good illustration of when it might be time to step in.
Okay.
Because again, this isn't about judging someone's taste in music, right?
Right.
It's about those ripple effects, how it impacts their life and the people around them, right?
Mm.
So are there any, like, signs of neglect,
Mm-hmm.
even subtle ones?
Yeah.
Have their financial priorities totally shifted? I think those are questions worth considering.
And that financial side of it can be so tricky because we all have different spending habits.
Exactly.
But when it's like someone potentially going into debt
Yeah.
or like skipping bills to support like their fandom, that's where those alarm bells, they kind of start going off, right?
Yeah, you got to recognize that line between passion and, like, potentially harmful behavior.
Mm.
And the research you sent, it even touched on mental well-being.
Okay.
Some experts even suggested that intense fandom can actually be like a form of escapism.
And that is interesting because on the one hand, I can totally see diving headfirst into something like a musician's world as a way to cope with stress or other tough emotions.
Yeah.
Like we all need outlets, right?
Exactly. And the Let It Be side had a really good point here.
Yeah.
They were talking about that sense of community fandom can offer,
Right?
especially for people who might feel isolated.
Okay.
Because those shared interests, they can be really powerful for, like, forging connections and finding your tribe,
Mm.
I think that social aspect is really important, and we shouldn't discount it.
So it's not like inherently a bad thing.
Right.
Like if someone's finding genuine joy, and friendship through being part of this fandom, maybe it's a positive thing in their life.
It absolutely can be, yeah.
Yeah.
One article I saw even cited a study where they found that for a lot of people, particularly those struggling with social anxiety,
Ah.
online fan communities, they actually provided a really safe space
No, interesting.
to connect with others who get it,
Hmm.
and to even, like, develop their communication skills.
Oh.
So it was seen as this stepping stone to actually forming more, deeper, meaningful relationships out in the real world.
That's a really good point. Actually, I hadn't even thought about it that way. It's like it really does come down to each person, and their own situation.
Exactly. And, it's not black and white. There's a whole spectrum of how people engage with their fandom.
Right.
Like some just dabble,
Mhm.
they're on the periphery.
Yeah.
And then there are others who are, like, all in, attending every concert, every convention.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The articles also mention something else. It's the idea that some people are drawn to these fandoms because of like the positive influence of certain celebrities.
Okay. Yeah.
Like maybe this pop star speaks out for a cause they really believe in, or they promote a message of self-acceptance. It makes sense that people would want to, emulate the people they admire, right?
Totally. Celebrity influence is huge. One study actually found that after this popular musician advocated for increased voter registration,
Okay.
online registration among, like, 18 to 24-year-olds saw a significant spike.
Wow, that's really interesting. So it really can have like create positive social change.
Oh, for sure. It can. But there's another side to it, too.
Oh, okay.
Another study found that teenagers who were super into the lives of these reality TV stars,
Hmm?
who had very materialistic values,
Yeah.
they actually tended to care less about community involvement and social responsibility.
It's like that saying, right? With great power comes great responsibility.
It
Size
could-
to celebs, too.
Absolutely. Which leads us to another interesting point.
Okay.
While fandom can definitely be inspiring, it's important to figure out the difference between healthy admiration
Right.
and, potentially unhealthy obsession.
That makes a lot of sense. So how can someone tell if, like, their loved one's fandom is kind of tipping into that unhealthy category?
That's where it gets a little tricky, to be honest.
Yeah.
One psychologist, they suggested looking for some key indicators. The first being, is this fandom, like consuming their thoughts
Yeah.
to the point where it's actually interfering with their day-to-day life?
So, like, they're not handling their responsibilities, or
Yeah.
they're constantly withdrawing from friends and family to do more, fan activities.
Exactly. The second thing is, are they using it like as a way to cope with deeper emotional issues rather than, actually addressing them in a healthier way?
Makes me think back to that study about escapism we talked about.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to find joy and community in a fandom, but it's another thing entirely to use it as a way to just, like, avoid your real-life problems,
Exactly. And then finally, the third thing is their fandom causing, like, financial strain or reckless spending? We kind of touched on it earlier, but it's a big one.
For sure. So let's say you're listening to all this, and maybe you're realizing that your loved one's fandom is maybe ringing some alarm bells.
Yeah.
What's the next step? Like, what do you do?
Well, there's no magic solution, right? It's different for everyone.
Right.
But the first step is, like, approaching this whole thing with some empathy and understanding.
So not just, like, storming in with accusations and judgment. Yeah, it's got to be about understanding the why, right? Not just, like, jumping to conclusions about what we're seeing on the surface.
100%. It's like, instead of saying this fandom thing, it's ruining your life.
Right.
Maybe try to understand what it's giving them,
Sure.
Is it connection? A sense of belonging? Maybe they're looking for a purpose, and this fandom gives them that.
It's like we've been saying, once you kind of get the root of it, that's when you can actually talk about it, you know?
Yeah.
So instead of staging, like, a full-on intervention about this pop star,
Right.
maybe the real conversation needs to be about, like, what's going on underneath.
Now you're getting it. And remember that whole thing about the online fan communities?
Yeah.
And how they were helping those folks with social anxiety? It could be that this, intense fandom is a sign that they're struggling to connect in other parts of their life.
Whoa.
Or, maybe gives them that outlet, that creative space they don't have otherwise.
Like, maybe the pop star isn't really the problem, right? But it's more like a symptom of something else that we're just not seeing.
No.
And so if we change how we're looking at it, instead of this is unhealthy, we ask, what's it doing for them? That's got to be a better way to talk about it.
Exactly. And that's where, like, having some actual things you can do really matters
Okay.
if you're worried about someone.
Right.
First thing, educate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Try to understand this whole fandom thing, the good and the bad,
Right.
the stuff you found. That's a good start.
Right. Knowledge is power, or whatever they say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, like we were talking about, come to the conversation ready to listen, not to judge.
Yeah.
So, like, instead of saying you're spending way too much on this pop star, maybe try, hey, I've noticed you've been in a lot of concerts lately. Everything okay?
Yeah.
Anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, that's way better. Give them a chance to open up without feeling, attacked or misunderstood.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe this conversation, it'll help you see some things they need that you can help them with in a better way.
Right.
Like maybe they feel alone and joining a club or something would help.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're dying to do something creative, like a pottery class or learning to write.
This has been, wow, really eye-opening. I feel like we went way beyond just, should they be a fan or not,
Right.
We were talking about families, how people cope, what it means to share interests, even psychology, kind of.
It really shows you how complicated we are,
For sure.
and how important it is to not just assume things about each other.
Absolutely. So to everyone out there, to anyone listening who's dealing with this right now, here's something to think about. If this isn't really about the pop star, then what's it about? What is it giving your loved one? And how can you help them find a balance that works?
And remember, you don't have to go through this alone. If you need help, talk to someone like a therapist. Maybe they can give you a fresh perspective.
Because sometimes, the biggest journeys start with just one question. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.